You're rocking with the best. Thoughts of the week. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Thoughts of the Week. We in the year 2020, and I thank you guys for coming in, checking out the show. This is the first show of the year, but we're at episode or podcast 57. All right, and I got a lot of plans for the podcast show this year. We're now going to be taking in calls on recorded episodes as well as live episodes. So if you guys want to call in the show, feel free to check out the number and call in. What you'll get if it's a recorded show, we're going to have, once you call in the phone number, there'll be a recording explaining when the next show is, whether it's recorded or live, and what the topic might be about, and that way you guys can kind of get yourselves together. Now, if you want to leave a message, you can always feel free to do that in regards to whatever the topic is, and we'll try to get some of you guys voice messages on the show as well. All right, even if I'm going live, or if I'm recording the show and somebody's on the line and you can't get through, feel free to leave your take on whatever the topic might be. All right, so we're definitely going to have some call-in shows for sure. I'm going to try to give it more live shows where you guys can call in and interact in real time, but there will be times when I'll be doing recorded shows, but you guys can still call in. All right, so before we get started here, for some of you guys who enjoy the Valentine's season or the Valentine's holiday, we got some products here. And we got the dog with the nice little heart here. All right. If you guys are animal lovers, and particularly dog lovers, if you guys want to purchase this, here we got it for you. It's one left of these. All right. Also, we got here for Valentine's, we got the twins. All right. We got the twins going on here. You guys check it out. We got the twins. This is for Valentine's Day. All right. And lastly, what we have here, some cool little bears, Valentine's Day bears. You guys check it out right there. Let me see right there. There you go. All right. There you go. There you go. And you can get these products at the product store. All right. You can go to theproductstorecompany.com. Go to theproductstorecompany.com. All right, and you guys can get these products here. Okay. Again, we got the dolls. We got one dog left here. You guys want one of those? Go to theproductstorecompany.com. All right, theproductstorecompany.com. And also, if you guys want to learn how to protect yourself, whether physically or outside of the realm of physically, you guys can check out the new course. It's called How to Be Your Own VIP Protection Specialist. And basically that means how to be your own bodyguard. All right. And protecting someone else or protecting yourself, being your own bodyguard, which I think is very important for you guys to take into consideration, because not everybody can hire a close protection specialist to protect them. Nobody can hire a bodyguard. You don't have Secret Service on speed dial, so you got to learn how to be your own Secret Service agent. You got to learn how to be your own bodyguard. You got to learn how to be your own close protection specialist. All right. And there's a course out. Again, it's called How to Be Your Own VIP Protection Specialist. It's available now. You guys take it. And the thing about this course, it doesn't involve physical. There'll be other courses on that you can learn to protect yourself physically, but this course deals with doing research. It deals with using your brain, using your mind. It deals with more planning to in order to protect yourself. All right. So you guys may or may not know, some do, some don't. When you have the Secret Service protecting the president, and the president has to go travel, or any dignitary, any executive, it could be a celebrity, a highly paid celebrity, it could be the president, it could be a dignitary, vice president, so on and so forth. When they go doing travel, they have to plan. All right, they have to research the areas that they're going to. They have to plan. They have to make contact with people and make certain plans. So when they begin their travels, they're knowing what they expect during travels. They plan for any security breaches. They plan for attacks, and that's what this course is really about: how to plan your travels. Whether even if you're at home, even if you're not traveling, just going to the store. There's some things that's important for you to know and for you to do. Just going to the store. If you're going to visit, if you're going out of town for a weekend, you need to plan some things and know what particular types of crimes you might face in going in certain areas, what type of activities might go on. And that's what this course really teaches you. All right. So you guys check it out. You want to learn how to be your own bodyguard, go check this course out. It's very affordable. You'll see with a lot of courses, people are charging $500, $1,000 here, or $200 or $300. This course is only $57, and it has, I guarantee you, it's in, as far as competition wise, compared to your courses that are $200 and $300, $500, $1,000. I guarantee you get a lot of information from this course that you can apply right after you take the course, and it's very beneficial. And like I said, the price is very affordable, very affordable, and it gives you a lot of information, trust me. So with that being said, I want to show you guys, for those who are watching, for those who are listening, you'll know what I'm talking about here in a minute. But I went and got this book yesterday. All right, you see that book here by Dr. Claud Anderson, and it's called A Black History Reader: 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. All right, so I got this book yesterday, and what I'm gonna do today is I was just browsing through it, kind of flipping the pages and just looking at some stuff and looking at the questions. I'm like, oh wow, there's a lot of different questions in here. And it asks a question, then I guess it gives an explanation and breaks it down, and then it goes to the next question. So you have like 101 questions in here, if I'm not mistaken. Let me look at this thing here to verify this. It says 101 questions you never thought to ask. Well, let's see here. All right, I see a question 100, and let's see if we can find 101. See 99. I see 100. And there's 101. There you go. You guys, 101 questions. You see that? There you go. So, again, like I said, I was, just going through it, breezing through here, and just flipping and looking at the questions and flipping and looking at questions and flipping. And I said, man, I could do several shows just reading a question, just one question, and then reading what it says and kind of commenting on it. And I think they're very important questions. And as I was breezing through some of them, and I'm still doing it right now, looking through it as I'm talking to you guys, I still see a whole bunch of other questions like, man, this is some good stuff in here, good information. And what I wanted to do is, there was one question that I came up to real quick, and I was thinking about, should I do this one? All right. And this will be, I think what I'm going to do is question number 9 in the book today. On this particular episode, I'm going to do question number 9. But before I do that, I'm just going to read the back of this book real quick. All right. So you guys can get an idea. Here we go. One more time. I'm going to hold the book up here. A Black History Reader. 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask by Dr. Claud Anderson. And before I read the back of the book, another thing that kind of drew my attention or drew me to want to kind of go through this book a little bit on a few episodes is that some of you guys may have seen Claud Anderson's interview on the Breakfast Club, and I thought it was a very good interview. And of course, he promotes his books every now and then. And I thought he was given the task to Charlemagne and Envy about, trying to get these books in the schools. And I think all his books in the school systems, because he said there's been a problem with trying to get it in, maybe the colleges and stuff like that. I think the Black History books should definitely be in the high schools for sure. All right, and I just wanted to kind of add an addition to what he was saying from the Breakfast Club, and give you all some more detail on it. So with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and read the back of this. It says, after 500 years, why are blacks still on the bottom? All right. How has social integration failed Black Americans? Have the nation's immigration policies injured Black Americans? Is the U.S. Constitution an affirmative action plan for whites? What will be President Barack Obama's greatest legacy? Now, there was a question that was one of the questions in there, and I might go through that on the next episode. It was quite interesting when I was reading some of it. All right, so it says here, for nearly 500 years, blacks in America have lived within a continuum of socio-economic systems: legalized slavery, Jim Crow segregation, political correctness that maldistributed nearly 100% of the nation's wealth, land, resources, rights, privileges, and controls of all levels of government into the hands of whites. All right. Simultaneously, those systems consign blacks into an impoverished, powerless underclass. Let me read that again. Simultaneously, those systems consign blacks into an impoverished, powerless underclass, denied the fruit of their labor, freedom, and basic rights. It was impossible for blacks to be anything other than what white society wanted them to be. The U.S. Constitution, the court system, and major corporations were all complicit in locking blacks into a carefully designed social construct on race. All right. That social construct, instituted even before the official founding of the nation, was so culturally entrenched that not the Civil War, the Black Civil Rights Movement, or social integration could significantly alter its effects. All right. A Black History Reader, Dr. Claud Anderson's 5th book, was written to highlight and examine this ignored social construct on race, its effects on black Americans, and strategies they can use to take advantage of its weaknesses. Excuse me. Using a question and answer format, Dr. Anderson focuses on the etiology of white racism embedded within the social construct. The nation, however, ignores the exceptionality of Black Americans, treats them as guests, then promotes the untruth that all groups have contributed equally in the development of this nation. Neither natives nor immigrants learned the accurate history of the nation and the fact that blacks were the economic engine that drove the country's development. A Black history reader corrects the myths, distortions, lies, and omissions about the exceptional contributions of blacks. It is based on the socio-economic self-empowerment principles of Powernomics. So buy it, read it, then help eradicate racism. All right? So that's the breakdown. That should give you a good idea what this book is going to be about, telling you about, breaking it down. So again, like I said, I went on and looked through the book. And found a lot of questions very interesting. I think very important for people to look at. And today I'm going to do it on question number 9. I'm going to do this podcast for question number 9. And the question reads, what is the difference between a Black American and an African American? All right. Again, question number 9 in the book says, what is the difference between a Black American and an African American? Now, I picked this before I go into it and start reading it. I picked this as I was looking through because there's been this big movement or push as of late that people are starting to distinguish themselves between being native black, what Dr. Anderson calls native black, what is also known as foundational Black Americans, what is also known as descendants of American slaves or descendants of American slavery. All right, and then there's been this this group who has been pretty much exposed, which is known as ADOS, and this probably will be the last time I mention their names because I don't even want to mention their names, but just to give y'all some context and let you know what's going on. There's been I want to say gentleman, let's just say his name, Antonio Moore. I think Antonio is his middle name, but Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell. All right, they formed this group called American Descendants of Slaves, and what has been found out is that this group is not really for black people, but they was using the name, fronting like they was going to be for black issues, but it's turned out that they're just a front for the Democratic Party, LGBT, so on and so forth. And they've been exposed in so many ways, and I'm not going to go into it here, but you guys can check out a YouTube channel called The Black Authority. You can go to Professor Black Truth. You guys can check out Tariq Nasheed, and you get all the breakdown of them exposing this fake group. All right, very much detail. It's no just talking out of their mouths. They're breaking it down and breaking it in detail, so you can make your own decision, your own judgment on whether or not, for blacks anyway, whether or not you want to join their group or not. I'm not, I'll pass on them. But just to give you some context, this is the reason why I picked this question here. All right. So again, what is the difference between a Black American and an African American? The terms Black American and African American are not equivalent or interchangeable, although they are generally but erroneously considered as such by whites and some native blacks. Black Americans are born in America and are descendants of slaves. I'm going to read that again. Black Americans are born in America and are descendants of slaves. Excuse me. African American is a term most accurately applied to a person born in Africa that has relocated or migrated to America. In reality, each term is derived from totally different cultural, language, political, religious, and racial experiences. I want y'all to get that. Any group is a sum total of its unique experiences, which dictate the way group members see themselves in this world. 99% of all the black people in America are descendants of slaves who were born in America. Their only connections to Africa are the oral stories told to them by their parents and grandparents, which faded with each generation. They have no personal connection to Africa, and not one country on the African continent ever sent a single vessel to this country to rescue any of the millions of blacks who were kidnapped, enslaved, killed, and psychologically crippled. Now I'm going to read that again. They have no personal connection to Africa, and not one country on the African continent, ever sent a single vessel to this country, the U.S., to rescue any of the millions of blacks who were kidnapped, enslaved, killed, and psychologically crippled. Enslaved blacks in America were decultured and forced to devise their own survival skills and attitudes. These enslaved persons and their offspring were stripped of everything and forced to adapt and survive under the most inhumane conditions for over 360 years. During that period of time, they developed a blended culture and emerged as black Americans, no longer Africans. Now that's some detail to really take in and ingest what I read. All right, because like I said before, there's been a lot going on with other immigrants, even from the islands, whether it's Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Haiti, so on and so forth. Africans, of course, coming from Africa. And there's been a tendency that a lot of the black immigrants are, when it comes to reparations, because this is one of the reasons why I decided to do this question as well. And what you're finding is that a lot of black immigrants are trying to blend themselves into the reparations discussion, as if they should be owed reparations from America. But what you heard me read so far will kind of give you an idea and explain that there's a segment of blacks here who are descendants of those who were taken, stolen, and I'll read this again here. They were kidnapped, enslaved, some were killed, and psychologically crippled. All right? Enslaved blacks in America were decultured and forced to devise their own survival skills and attitudes. All right? So once the enslaved Africans were stolen, kidnapped, some of them, from what I hear, some of them even killed themselves because they were not going to be forced to do something. So some of them, my understanding, even escaped the ship and just jumped in the water to die because they were not going to be enslaved. And so you have that. You have some that were just killed. Some were psychologically crippled. And then they were brought to the U.S. and they had to start developing survival skills and a survival attitude. All right. So, and then their culture, they were decultured, whatever culture they came with from Africa, however they was doing it to them, psychologically stripping them of that, to where they no longer knew anything about their culture. And then each generation, enslaved generation, you know, it kind of fizzled. The culture, the African culture, fizzled out, and they started developing, created their own culture in the U.S. So Black Americans that are who are the descendants of slaves, created their own type of culture, their own black culture that's separate and outside of Africa, Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Aruba, so on and so forth, Puerto Rico, Cuba, whatever. They came over and started having to create their own culture. They had to develop their survival skills, created a different survival attitude, all right? And like I said, when it comes to reparations, the things that I mentioned in here alone is reason to give the descendants of slaves that's in America their reparations, all that stuff done to them, all right? And the fact that even to this day, other ethnicities or races, if you want to say that, are still getting reparations in different forms today, still getting it. So anybody who says, oh, you don't need that, that was a long time ago, and whatever other excuses, I heard there was some people in government made some comments in the past too. That's garbage, because there's still people getting reparations now. All right, they might not be using the word reparations, but when you see the finances and the come up that they're getting, it's reparations. All right, let me see here. And again, I'll go back to one of the paragraphs where it says their only connections to Africa, meaning the enslaved, the enslaved Africans that came to America, the black people here back then, their only connections to Africa once they got here are the oral stories, the stories traded, told to each other by their parents and grandparents. And with each generation, those stories faded more and faded more and faded more, to it got to the point where each generation of blacks that were brought here, that anything about Africa, the information kept fading and fading and fading till they no longer had a connection, didn't know too much about the culture in Africa or whatever. So again, black Americans started making their own culture here. All right. It says during that period of time, they developed a blended culture and emerged as black Americans, no longer Africans, because of all the things that were going on. The stripping of their culture, the psychologically crippling them, deculturing, which forced the slaves and that were brought here to get in survival mode. They forced them to devise their own survival skills. So once they got here, they started developing their own survival skills, all right, and survival attitudes. All right, so black Americans are totally unlike any other humans on this earth. Black Americans are totally unlike any other humans on this earth. They are a combination of cultures and uncommon experiences. Therefore, the group is special and exception. Some avoid the term black because they do not want to identify with the negative and evil historically associated with the word by whites and other groups. All right, I'm going to read that again. Some avoid the term black because they do not want to identify with the negative and evil historically associated with the word by whites and other groups. All right, that's some of the blacks who don't want to use the word black, who don't want to say they're black, even though they're dark skinned as I am. Even the light skinned ones, there's some light skinned ones want to be as dark as me, and some don't want to be black at all. All right, go figure. Okay. Some blacks shun self-identification by color because it means being less than a full human. Again, some blacks shun self-identification by color because it means being less than a full human, stripped of all honor and subjected to all forms of white rule and power. All right. They have allowed others to frame their thinking of the label or the word black. Those who avoid blackness, in effect, have surrendered their greatest strength and badge of identity. Black Americans are unique. Now, black Americans now, this doesn't mean African immigrants, other black immigrants from other countries, the ones who are descendants of slaves, those black Americans are unique. The enslavement process stripped blacks of their Africanness and forced them to forge together their own unique culture. It is so unique that it is copied, mimicked, and appropriated by non-blacks all over the world. Let me say that again. Let me read that again. The enslavement process stripped blacks of their Africanness and forced them to forge their own unique culture. It is so unique that it is copied, mimicked, and appropriated by non-blacks all over the world. And you can definitely see that when you think about music, when you think about any forms of entertainment. A lot of blacks created a lot of stuff in this country. Dance. All right, their style of talk, their style of dress, their mannerisms, their behaviors. Even, I would say, intellectually, you could put the intellect in there as well, because they have a different way of doing things intellectually, seeing things in a certain way intellectually, and that gets mimicked or stolen or appropriated. All right, and this is the blacks in America, the descendants of slaves. Not the immigrants that come over who know their culture from where they come from, who know about themselves to some degree. Not them. It's the ones that everything got stripped from them. All right? Let me see here. It is so unique that it is copied, mimicked, and appropriated by non-blacks all over the world. You got Russian rappers. You have Chinese rappers, Japanese rappers. Come on now. Many blacks, non-blacks, and especially conservatives prefer the term African American. It is a term that removes race from a race-based dilemma and redirects focus to culture. Notice the trick, all right? African American is a less specific term than black. African American is a less specific term than black. Just as substituting terms like minority, people of color, and poor people is less threatening than the term black. The term African American obfuscates, I think that's how you pronounce it, dilutes and erases the unique history of blacks in this country. Blacks should never be equated to African Americans or other groups within minority classes. Using the term African American is an example of changing black problems to a minority solution. Since all life began in Africa, in the broadest sense, the label African American can be applied to any human from any place on the earth that migrates to America. Now, that's very important because, again, if they start playing the game of giving reparations to African Americans, well, you can actually be white and considered an African American, but you actually didn't have, you or your family members didn't have the experiences that the blacks had here with slavery. so you can get by on the reparations and get a paycheck because you label yourself African American. That's where the danger comes in when you want to label everybody African American when it comes to a financial situation like reparations. So there goes the trick, one of the tricks there. On top of when you use words, when you hear words like minority, people of color, poor people, you thinking that means they're talking about blacks, but they're really not. And so those words that I mentioned, please keep those words in mind, because those are code words, those are trick words. All right? I want y'all to get that in your heads like real thick. Seriously, those words are trick words. When you hear minority, you're going to automatically think they're talking about black people. So if they start saying, we're going to give, like you hear Bernie Sanders and others talk about, we're going to help minorities out, they're not talking about blacks. And if there's blacks involved, there's other groups involved too. They could be talking about Indians from East India. They could be talking about Asians. They're not just talking about black, if they're even talking about black people at all. All right? All right, so now let's look at some more of this here. Let me just read on, and hopefully what I read will sink in with you guys. I'll try to do as less comment as I can, because I think he's really concise and detailed and to the point in this explanation to this question. So you should get a good understanding of it, okay? So let me see here. Where did I left off? Let me start here. Blacks should never be equated to African Americans or other groups within minority classes. Using the term African American is an example of changing black problems to a minority solution. I'm going to read that again. Using the term African American is an example of changing black problems to a minority solution. Remember, I talked about minority. Since all life began in Africa in the broadest sense, the label African American can be applied to any human from any place on the earth that migrates to America. Once they establish residence in America, they can legitimately claim to be African American. Black exceptionality is a fundamental key to unlock the doors leading to group self-empowerment, recognition, respect, and appreciation for their contributions to the socio-economic development of this nation, to which they are entitled as special people. They must distinguish themselves by claiming their exceptionality as Black Americans, just as Europeans in the 1680s distinguished themselves by officially labeling themselves white Americans instead of pilgrims or Puritans. The label white distinguished them thereafter. Due to the fact that the masses of blacks in America, due to the fact that the masses of blacks in America are totally ignorant of Africa, they identify with the African American label only out of love and respect for the black people residing on the African continent. Very important. In physical and genetic makeup, they are as far from being African blacks as they are far from being European whites. There are enormous differences in the experiences of a black person born and raised in America versus an African born and raised on the African continent. And I'm going to read that one again. Let me see here. There are enormous differences in the experiences of a black person born and raised in America versus an African born and raised on the African continent. Native blacks in America were stripped of their Africanness centuries ago when their ancestors were transported to the Americas. It was at that point that their differences began. So I want all you guys from Africa and these other countries to get this point made clearly, all right? And I'm going to read that again. Native blacks in America were stripped of their Africanness centuries ago when their ancestors were transported to the Americas. It was at this point that their differences began. Blacks were forced to create and fabricate a culture that blended the various African tribal backgrounds with the American culture they found here. Being enslaved in America was a very different experience than being colonized on the African continent. Another key. I'm going to read that again. Being enslaved in America was a very different experience than being colonized on the African continent. African blacks were not stripped of their culture. That's very true. African blacks, people in Africa, when people started coming over, the Europeans started colonizing Africa, you weren't stripped of your culture, languages, families, relatives, homeland, communities, religion, and sense of peoplehood. You were not stripped of none of those. When the blacks that were stolen and brought here, we were stripped from all of that. All right? Big difference. Where, on the other hand, black Americans were stripped, I just said that, black Americans were stripped in all respects, reduced to the level of field animals and treated as disposable property. Consequently, African blacks who visit or migrate to the United States sense they are different from native blacks and tend to express a degree of superiority over the descendants of slaves. And that's very true. I've seen that happen. I've heard that happen. And that doesn't go for all of you Africans or people who are Jamaican or Haitian, but some of you are Cuban or Puerto Rican, but some of you think you are superior than the blacks who are stolen and who are the descendants of slaves. For whatever crazy reason y'all think that, you think you're superior than the blacks in America. All right? It's crazy. And yet we're the ones who built everything so you can come over here and get the benefits from that. And I don't understand why the respect for that alone is not even given. All right? So I'm going to read that again. Consequently, African blacks who visit or migrate to the United States sense they are different from native blacks and tend to express a degree of superiority over the descendants of slaves. They are different. They came here voluntarily. Key, they came here on their own. They voluntarily came over. Have homelands and relatives in Africa with whom they identify and communicate, and they have a place to return whenever they so choose. We don't have, meaning we, the descendants of slaves, don't have a place to return to. Everything about any type of Africanness has been stripped, so we couldn't even find or know who to go to, where to go to, because everything has been stripped. All right, but those are you African black immigrants from wherever, Somalia, again I say Jamaica, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Haitian, Dominican Republic, you have a place you can go back to because all these things were still intact. All right, the culture is still intact, your language is still intact, you can still speak those languages. We were stripped to even speaking the language. So we can't even speak any of the African languages. That's how much they strip stuff from us and from the slaves before us, or the slaves up until now. I can't even speak any type of African, although I'm learning Swahili. We can't even speak those languages, but Africans have their language. They can speak to each other. All right. Dominican Republic, those who are dark skinned, that have that same African phenotype, they can speak languages to each other languages. Not to say we can't learn it, but it's been stripped from us. So the language has been stripped, the culture, families, relatives, homeland, communities, religion, the sense of peoplehood, that's all been stripped. All right. So consequently, African blacks who visit or migrate to the United States Since they are different from the native blacks and tend to express a degree of superiority over the descendants of slaves, they are different. They came here voluntarily, have homelands and relatives in Africa with whom they identify and communicate, and they have a place to return whenever they so choose. Americans recognize the difference also and accord greater respect to African visitors and dignitaries than to native blacks. In fact, it was not unusual prior to the civil rights movement of the 1960s for some black Americans to dress in African garb and pretend to be African visitors or dignitaries just to garner greater respect from white Americans. It's crazy. Using unspecific terms like African American obscures the unique history of blacks in America and can have harmful effects similar to what happens when the terms minority, people of color, or poor people are used instead of black. A lawsuit filed by a Pakistani who applied for the African American Banneker Scholarship at the University of Maryland in the 1990s demonstrates the folly of imprecise language. The university denied him a scholarship because recipients had to be African American. The Pakistani student filed a lawsuit charging the university with discrimination. The student's case was based on a very simple but reasonable explanation. The Pakistani student said he had lived in Africa before migrating to the United States and considered himself African. Now that he lives in America, he is an African American. The Maryland Supreme Court agreed and ruled in the student's favor, awarding him $150,000. Now that makes the whole point of using the words black people who are descendants of slaves needs to start moving away from you saying that they're African Americans for a whole host of reasons that I read in this particular for this particular question. All right, and you can just go back and play the video. For those who are listening on podcast platforms, just play it back. All right. The message to native blacks is a caution. In circumstances where a race label is necessary, do not permit the use of broad and ambiguous terms to define you. The school did not meet its goal of providing scholarships for the specific purpose of attracting black students. The school's needs were specific, but the term African American was not. It expanded the target group in an imprecise way. Had the school used the term black, the Banneker Scholarship Fund would have had an additional $150,000 to distribute toward worthy black applicants. All right, so I'm going to read that again. Had the school used the term black instead of African American, see, if they would have used the term black instead of using the term African American, the Banneker Scholarship Fund would have had an additional $150,000 to distribute toward worthy black applicants, black meaning the descendants of slaves. But they used African American, and like I mentioned earlier, anybody can pretty much be called an African American, whether they lived in Africa or not, because the saying is that civilization started in Africa, or the first people came from Africa. So anybody can pretty much say they are African American. And see, that's where the game comes in at. So you got to establish yourself of who you are. We are a unique group of black people that had stuff stripped from us. So we are different from the experiences of the blacks in Africa. They were colonized, and they think they were superior than blacks that who are the descendants of slaves. They think they're superior than them, but they still had everything intact. Their culture was intact, their family, their language. The descendants of American slaves and I, like I said, I can put myself in it because I don't know what my language was. I don't even know, not even let alone what can I even speak it. I don't even know which language did I speak. So we have a different set of experiences, and the descendants, or I should say the slaves that came before me, they were forced to develop certain survival skills. So within my DNA are the slaves' survival skills and their attitudes. So that's what's part of my DNA as well, right? So it's a whole different set of people, group of people. All right, let me see here. So if the school would have used the word black instead of using African American, they would have had that money, that $150,000, to give specifically for black applicants, black descendants of slaves, of American slaves. They would have had that money for them. But the Pakistani dude, who apparently is not black, he just said because he lived in Africa before he came over here, he was able to get the money just by saying, "Hey, I lived over in Africa first, so I'm African American now. I came from Africa, I lived there. Now I'm an American. Now I'm African American," and so he got money, scholarship money. Which you know that ain't right. All right. So the distinction between black and African America is important. The distinction between black and African America is important. Blacks came here as Africans. They came here as Africans, but what they experienced in this country made them different. They were stripped of everything: their culture, language, religion, the right to benefit from their own labor. The right to benefit from their own labor. They were stripped of everything: their culture, their language, their religion. So I don't know too much in the African culture. Definitely don't know what language I probably would have spoke if everything was still intact. The religions that they dealt with, the right to benefit from their own labor. They were not acknowledged as humans and were denied the expression of natural human longings. They could not love, protect, or plan for their families. Blacks, descendants of slaves, endured these experiences. All the while, their labor drove the economic engine that built this nation called the U.S., or the United States of America, or America. All right, their labor, the blacks, the descendants, the slaves who I descended from, they endured the experiences, and all the labor drove the economic engine of this country. If you guys want to know why and how the U.S. at some point, which people are now saying that it's probably starting to fall, but at one point, the reason why the U.S. was so powerful is because the slaves were the ones who was the economic engine of building this country. Straight facts. All right. Let's see. Economic engine that built this nation. Withstanding and surviving these experiences became the badge of courage that distinguishes native blacks from any other group in America. Again, I'm going to read that. Withstanding and surviving all those experiences that went on to enslave blacks in America. Withstanding and surviving those experiences became the badge of courage that distinguishes native blacks from any other group in America. We are different. We are different, distinguished people from other blacks that are here, that came here, from blacks from Africa, from blacks from Jamaica, from blacks from Haiti, from blacks from Trinidad, from blacks from Tobago, from blacks from Dominican Republic, from blacks from Haiti. I might have said Haiti before, Cuba, Puerto Rico. All right, we're different. We're distinguished different. And you're going to find, now I would say this, if it started looking like that blacks were going to get reparations and that there was going to be a law or something put through, you're going to find that all these black immigrants are all going to start trying to embed themselves in and try to say they're black. But as long as that doesn't happen, like I read earlier in the question, that a lot of people try to get away from being black, even including black people, because of that negative stigma. But I guarantee you, if the money started coming in, that everybody who might can pass for black, even though they're from these other countries and they are immigrants and their cultures and everything's are still intact, they're going to try to be black again. That's why I did a podcast a while back. Maybe it might have been the last one. Is it popular or something to that effect? I think it's podcast 56. Is it cool to be black again? All right? Because people might be starting to notice that, hey, the blacks might be getting, they're moving into some type of position here. And when I say that, I mean, again, I'm saying the descendants of slaves. All right? Okay, so withstanding and surviving these experiences became the badge of courage that distinguishes native blacks from any other group in America. Those experiences signify this country's indebtedness to them. Those experiences signify this country's, the U.S., indebtedness to the black people, descendants of slaves and these slaves at that time in America. There may be a difference in the terms and historical experiences, but the two groups are genetically linked genetically. It is imperative, therefore, that native black Americans support and recognize Africa, all right, the birthplace of mankind, and strive to protect its people and material resources from further abuse and exploitation by foreign entities. So even with all this being said regarding this question, Claud Anderson still says, yeah, we're linked genetically, and we should stand up and recognize and support Africa, the birthplace of mankind, and strive to protect the people. So we're the ones who always seem to be looking out, whether it's for other black immigrants and other races of people. We're always being told to look out for others and not for ourselves. We always, by kind of by nature, to a degree, look out for other groups, even other blacks from other countries, but it's never reciprocated by others. There's always some, but when you look at a massive whole, the more majority of people, whether they're African black, Jamaican black, Trinidadian black, Tobago black, Aruba black, Puerto Rican black, Brazilian black, Cuban black, whatever, or Dominican Republic black, whatever, they have a disdain and a dislike towards the black Americans who are the descendants of slaves. They know there's a difference between us. The experiences are different, and again, like I said, and what's been said in this book, is things have been stripped from us so bad and so deep that, like I said, I can point to somebody, I can go walk to somebody in the street and say, do you know what you would have originally spoken, what language, what African language? And they wouldn't know, because that's been stripped over the years. It's been just taken out, language, culture, religion, peopleness, family, all that stuff been stripped out. Although there's some stuff, DNA embedded from the descendants of slaves, because we had to, or they had to, and then of course it was put in our DNA as we became born and become adults, developed a way to survive, an attitude. Like I said, even today, everybody wants, there's rappers everywhere, that culture. All right, there's so many things that's dance, music, style, just the mannerisms, what people call swag. I don't particularly care for that word, but that's something, that's a word you probably can understand. A lot of people can get what I'm talking about. But their style, that's even without using the word swag, their style, their way of doing things, their manner of talk, their way of handling stuff. We have a difference in there. It had to be developed because the African style and the African swag was all taken away. So the black Americans, when they were forced to come here, they had to create their own style. They took some of the stuff that they had from, within them and blended it in with American and created something new. That's why they say a lot of times we create a lot of stuff. Always able to take things and create something new out of it. All right? So I'm going to end on that because that's the end of this particular question. Like I said, this is real deep, and I'll probably check out, we'll go into another question on another episode. Probably going to hit a lot of questions on there in between other shows and things I'm doing. We're gonna hit this book pretty heavy. All right. I don't know if the next episode is going to be dealing with the book because, like I said, for those who don't know and are aware, of course, you can start calling in shows now, and I'm going to have some interviews live and recorded. And so there's a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe for the podcast show, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. And like I said, 2020, I said this before, 2020 is going to be a great year, and it should be a great year for all of you. All right. Again, I stress that you pursue what you wanted to pursue that you kind of put to the side before. Any goals, any projects you wanted to work on, whether projects on yourself or projects outside. Any goals you want to accomplish, any things you put on hold for a while, and now you probably have the time to go back to it. I suggest you start doing it, all right? Whether it's starting a business, whether it's going back to school if you choose you want to do that. All right, things you wanted to do. If you want to get yourself in better physical shape, you could do that. So make sure you pursue those things now. All right. And so with that being said, I appreciate you guys for checking out the show, man. Be sure to tell your friends, family, enemies, co-workers, check out the show. And again, be sure to go to the product store, theproductstorecompany.com. Valentine's is coming up. We only have a few of these left. All right. These are the only two left right here. Valentine's Day. Get your Valentine's Day on. All right. Again, like I said, you got these. Got a few of these left. And there's only one of these right here. All right. And don't forget, if you guys want to learn how to protect yourself, because there's a lot there's a lot going on out there, and I think it's very important that one of the things throughout your entire life should be on top of your list. One of the things, not the thing, but one of the things is learning how to protect yourself. Because what I've learned and what I've seen in people, when you start learning how to protect yourself and you gain the knowledge of how to do it, whether it's the physical side or the non-physical side, or what they call soft skills or hard skills. The hard skills are more the hand-to-hands, the weapons of any type. The soft skills are more looking at how you being aware. You use your awareness skills, your researching, and things like that. Whether it's soft skills or hard skills, it develops a confidence in a person, within a person, that extends outside of your personal protection skills or your personal protection life. You be more confident if you're giving presentations, if you're a business person, or you're teaching somebody something, you'll be more confident. Even in kids, it develops a certain confidence in them when they really know how to protect themselves out in the street. And I stress that as opposed, I'm not knocking any martial arts schools or anything like that. What I'm talking about is dealing with attacks from the street, from anywhere, whether you're walking up to your car, whether something's going on, your kids are at school and somebody's trying to attack them at school, or kids might be trying to jump them. There are ways of dealing with multiple attackers, even with children having to deal with it, adults having to deal with it. There's things you can do to better your positioning of surviving when these attacks occur. Somebody's pulling weapons out on you. You got to learn how to get, lessen that fear of having to possibly deal with something like that. But when you start learning those skills and having that information and that knowledge, then you start becoming confident in other areas as well of your life. All right? Take my word for it. So make sure you go to surviveandprotectonline.com and take the course. There are other courses available on there, and there are more courses coming soon. But available now is how to be your own VIP protection specialist, as well as 6 websites to research threats. And there's another course called How To Simple Emergency Planning in 4 Easy Steps. Now, that particular course kind of helps you develop plans for things like when there's storms and hurricanes and earthquakes and stuff like that. Because recently I was looking at the news where they were saying Puerto Rico had that earthquake, and they had a lot of elderly people just out on the street sitting around, and I know they had no place to go. But if you start learning how to develop plans on what to do in situations like that, it will help your elderly family and help your family as a whole. So that course will help you out with developing plans and strategies to deal with beforehand. So if they happen, you already have a plan in place. So that course will show you how to put plans together to deal with stuff like that. Wildfires, home invasions, earthquakes, tornadoes, real heavy storms when it gets flooded. That's a good course to check out. It's 4 easy steps on how to do it. And that's a great course to take and learn as well. And the like I said, the 6 websites to research threats can be an add-on to the how to. It could be an add-on to any of them really, to how to be your own VIP protection specialist, because you're researching threats. Like if you want to travel somewhere, you might want to research some things first, and that way you know what you're dealing with, so you can create plans in case they may not never happen, but in case it happens, you don't get to this point where you just freeze up when the real situation occurs. All right, so any of those courses are very beneficial, and like I said, there's more coming. There's another course that's in the works called One Mind, Any Weapon, which starts getting you in the mindset of using anything as a weapon. All right, it's going to be a very good course, trust me, a very good course. So be looking out for that as well. All right, so again, go to theproductstorecompany.com and go to surviveandprotectonline.com. All right, so with that being said, as always, I'm out. Appreciate y'all. Peace. I'm gone.